This is getting results from Dharma practice. Once we've made up our mind that we want to learn the Dharma and we want to work with some of the Buddhist teachings, that's not the end of it. We actually have to do something. Take one path or another, or do one practice or another practice, or do something. So the question is, how do we choose just what practice to begin with when we know almost nothing about the Dharma? And that was exactly what happened to me. In the beginning, I did what study I could on Buddhism. I talked about it with people and I read different books, and finally I picked out a practice that looked attractive to me. Looking back, obviously it was one that appealed to my ego, actually. But I found out that you have to be given permission by a lama or a rinpoche to even do it. So I set about traveling to the nearest rinpoche that I knew personally, which was a 1,600-mile round trip, and it was the dead of winter. Also one of the coldest days in the world, 2 days. And I took my entire family with me. Now, as it turned out, the Rinpoche didn't give me permission to do that particular practice. But instead, he pointed out something much simpler for me to start with. Now, perhaps Rinpoche could see that the practice that I wanted to do was too difficult for me, and that the chances of my stalling out on it were likely. So he gave me something that I could actually do. And I didn't argue with him, but I did try to point out that I had done astrology for many years, and that was kind of spiritual. So I thought perhaps I could maybe place out of beginning Dharma practices, Dharma 101, and get on with some of the more advanced ones that of course, that was my ego talking, and how like me. So Rinpoche did acknowledge the astrology that I had done, but he went on to point out that since I did not really know meditation, the fastest way in my case was to start at the beginning and go on from there. Because the Rinpoche seemed so straightforward in everything he did, I kind of swallowed my pride, and I agreed to do what he suggested. And if I go back and count the beads of Dharma in my life, that moment, that decision to take his advice was very important. Now, some of you reading some of my blogs are asking me the same question that I ask. Where to begin with Dharma practice? And it doesn't matter how old you are. Rather, it matters only how sincere you are in your desire to practice. Not that any of us want to practice anything, but your desire to change and be liberated and to be more in the moment. So note that. We all know that when something scary in life happens to us, like a close call with death, or heaven forbid, the death of a loved one, we kind of get religion fast, if only for the moment. We stop with the unessential, this and that, and we're happy to have what we have, to be alive and all of that. And that's a message. So I'm not trying to scare you when I say that, as I mentioned, it's the purity of our intent, how serious we are about it, that determines our Dharma progress. Not how long we practice or how high a practice that we decide we should undertake. As Rinpoche said to me, if we are a beginner in the Dharma, starting at the beginning is the quickest way to any realization. we can progress rapidly from the beginning, but we can also stumble endlessly trying to do a practice that we're not ready for. In the history of Dharma practice, results are truly measured, when they result. But there are alternative ways of measuring it, and I want to point out a couple of them. One alternative to actual results includes doing a particular practice a certain number of times, say like 100,000 times. Another approach is to do a particular practice for a given length of time, like a year or 3 years or 10 years. In my experience, neither of these approaches is any guarantee of a result, and I'm living proof of it. I did the somewhat arduous practice called Nundro, also called the extraordinary preliminaries, all preliminary, and it involves things like 111,111 full-length prostrations on the floor, and then also 111,111 refuge prayers, taking refuge in the Dharma, followed by 111,111 100-syllable mantras that you have to learn and do that many times, followed by 111,111 mandala offerings, little piles of rice in a specific order on a copper plate. And then finally, the end of it, 111,111 rounds of what's called Guru Yoga, with its own mantras, its own visualizations. So when I finished all of that, and it took years, I told Rinpoche I had finished, and I asked him what he wanted me to do next. He, in turn, asked me if I wanted to know what he would do if he was me, or were me, whatever the correct English is. Of course I asked him, well, what? And then he said, and I quote, "I would do another complete round of Nundro," end quote. For me, that was a shock to the system, because I had just finished it. But both Margaret and I each did another round. And this is what I'm trying to say. That's what it took for me to work through my obscurations enough to finally learn to actually meditate. And the Dharma, so you'll find out, does not respond to brute force, but rather it responds to intelligent activity and pure intent on our part. So the only way to guarantee results is to get the actual result itself to actually become realized. And it helps to have an authentic teacher, someone with whom we can validate our results. Otherwise, we can just be fooling ourselves, and it wouldn't be the first time. As the Rinpoche once said to me, and I quote, "We are the stragglers. We're the ones that in all the time up until now have never managed to get enlightened," end quote. My answer to that was, yep, that would be me.